Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to Superpower Alliance. It is April, and for this month's meeting, I'm going to be talking about business basics. And so whether you're a group practice owner or a solo practitioner, these are just things you kind of learn along the way, things that I've learned by trial and error. I did not read a book about this. I did not go to business school. Like you, I went to school to be a therapist and nobody taught me how to run a business, but this is so important. So we're going to just talk about the basics. This is going to be purely for running a therapy practice, right? So this isn't like general business. This is the business of therapy. So Jeff, can you help me out? I want, you and I have had these conversations over the years, and you've been such a great sounding board, and we've kind of evolved into, for those of you that don't know, Jeff is my business partner now. So we run Red Therapy Group together. So we've sort of evolved into a way of thinking about this and actual system of efficiency really in our therapy practice. So Jeff, I would love for you to help me with this. Just kind of prompt me with some of the things that maybe some people are wondering about or want to maybe know more about how to do.
Yes, absolutely. So running a private practice, one of the first things I'm sure that people run into is, how do I maximize my caseload? Do I make available slots for as many people as I want to see each week, or is there a different way to think about that?
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of walk through what I used to do and why that did not work, and what I tell my clinicians in my group practice now. And so if you're a group practice owner, think about how you want to be communicating to your clinicians. Okay. And if you're, running your own private practice, this is direct advice for you. So let's say, you get started, you put the word out and the inquiries start coming in, and you're, maybe you're getting to the point where you have enough that you're full-ish, right? Maybe you're not booked solid, but let's say that you have it's rolling in, and usually what happens is you're actually doing the therapy, and so getting back to people starts to get overwhelming, and that starts to sort of slide to the back burner. And so something that you could do is just kind of react by feel. Does that make sense? So like, oh, I'm so full. So, maybe like the urgency goes down on responding to those inquiries. And that, it's just not a great way to do things. You want to have a system in place, and you want to work the system, no matter if you're booked solid or if you have one client on your caseload. Does that make sense? So you want to have something that it's the same thing that you do all the time. Obviously, it starts to get complicated when you are your intake coordinator. Most people are. Like, I'm thinking a lot of people on this call, you are your own intake coordinator, right? So you're the one answering the phone call, you're the one replying to the email, you're the one doing this. Now, if you're just slammed and you don't have a good system for doing it, then what's going to happen? People are going to fall through the cracks. They're not going to hear back from you. They're going to move on. And then when you have a slower, there's an ebb and flow to this, to this business. So when it's slower, then you're like, oh, I wish that person that reached out to me, 2 weeks ago, right? But by then it's too late. So to maximize your caseload, here's some rules of thumb. Number one, have a good system in place. How many times are you going to reach out to that person. Have a spreadsheet, some way of keeping track of all of this, right? How many times are you going to reach out to that person before you decide, you know what, I don't want to be a stalker, right? Like this is my limit. And I would say reach out way more than you think. My rule of thumb has been 4 times. If you want to make it more or less, it's not 4 times in one day, right? It's 4 times over the course of, let's say, 2 weeks. Okay. And then by the 4th time that I've reached out, I say, hey, this is my last time reaching out to you. And here's how to get a hold of me if you decide that you want to pursue. I can't tell you how many people on that 4th time go, whoa, wait. I do want to get in. Thank you so much for being persistent and reaching out. So you're not bugging people. Remember, they reached out to you in the first place. You didn't solicit this client. So make sure that you really kind of do your due diligence to give them every opportunity to get in with you. And keep in mind, people are busy. People have very, very busy lives, and they don't always respond in the way that you are responding back. So use different forms of communication: phone call, text, email, and decide for yourself when you want to do what, right? The good rule of thumb is the way that they reached out to you, reach out back in kind the first time. So if this client calls you, call them back, right? Then after that, you can kind of decide how you want to change it up. Okay, so let me kind of organize my thoughts here. So we want to reach out, have a system for how often, how many times, and over what length of period, and have a way to keep track of all that. So I have a spreadsheet. Jeff and I are actually working on a system using monday.com. Is that what it is, Jeff? Very high tech and advanced. So probably unless you're a good practice, you don't really need to be doing anything like that. But just a simple spreadsheet where you keep tabs on it and okay, I reached out to this person on this date and here's the status. Okay, it's time for me to reach out again, right? And that way, you're doing everything that you can to give those clients every opportunity to work with you. So that's one way to maximize your caseload. The other thing you want to think about is, so, I mean, my main thing that I'm saying to you is have a system. Don't just do this by feel. The other part of that is how many clients you decide to take on. You might have a week that it's just really hard. Like you have hard sessions and you get an inquiry that week and you go, oh, I don't want it. Well, really? Do you really not want it? Or is it just because it's a hard week? Right? So have another system for how many clients you want to see. Let's say that you want to see 15 clients average a week, right? You need to overbook yourself. You need to book, I would say, between 17 and 20 clients a week. Because what's going to happen inevitably every single time, about 2 to 3 will cancel. So that means you're still doing good. You still have you're maximizing your caseload. Therapists are really, really afraid to do this. Why? I think it's because they're afraid that if they take a client and they can't just absolutely see them as often as that client wants, that they're going to let them down, that kind of thing. And I was like that too. I used to try to make it this perfect puzzle. I would write down on a piece of paper, here's all my clients. And then I would here's all my slots. This client wants this time. This client wants this time. And I would try to put it in this perfect puzzle. And it just It's not like that. It's not a puzzle. These are real people. They're not robots. They have lives. Their schedule changes. Your schedule changes. You have to be, you have to take a little bit of a risk, overbook yourself, and think about the amount of active clients that you're taking. I would say take about 5 more than you want to have on your caseload. So that's kind of 2 ways of thinking about it. Overbooking, meaning actually booking a certain number of sessions a week, just like overbook it a little bit. And your comfort level on how much you overbook, right? If 5 feels too scary, then maybe overbook by 2, something like that. And then the second is just taking clients at all. Take a little more than what you think should be your caseload. The other thing is you don't want to assume that you might get a case and you think, oh, they're so motivated. This is going to be amazing. I'm going to see them weekly. Woohoo, let's go. And then, you get into it and it's not like that. They flake out. They don't, something just happens. Sometimes it has nothing to do with the therapy. It's just, somebody lost their job, or there's been a terrible illness, or life happens. And so you don't want to assume that you know how this is going to go based on that initial call. So that's why I say just try not to do this by feel. Have a system, and I promise you it works out in the end. It kind of comes out in the wash. I'm trying to think of another kind of anecdotal. You also might have somebody that you want to have enough room in your schedule for those clients that just show back up after not coming for a couple months, right? So it's kind of like, think about, have a really wide net. Yeah. And then, you're going to be able to maximize your caseload if your net is wider. So that's with how many people you see, the availability that you have, and then the sessions that you actually book. So I want to pause right here and just see any thoughts or questions based on what I'm saying. Is all of that making sense? And honestly, I know some of you. So and you've been doing this for a while. So what do you run into maybe, or what is it that keeps you from having a system and sticking with it?
I have a quick follow-up on something that you mentioned. What is your thought about trying to have slots open that are more client friendly versus what you want, or when you want to work?
Yeah, I'm so glad you're bringing that up. I think that there's a realistic pay your dues kind of thing that happens. And so in the beginning, you really do need to work hours that you just don't want to work. So nights, weekends, that's so that you can build your caseload, but also build your reputation, right? In the beginning, nobody knows you yet. So you need to really just put in your dues. I say that within reason, though. I think sometimes therapists do that a little too long because they get the sense that that's the only reason that they're full, maybe. And I say, as soon as you're really booked and you're getting those word of mouth referrals, start to drop those evening slots, start to drop those weekend slots. So I think it's I'm not sure there's a perfect rule of thumb there, but I do think that you do need to be willing to work hours that, those evening slots and weekends, they'll be booked every time, like so fast. And those are the slots that clients, if you're doing online booking, they get taken really quickly. People really jump on those. Another thing that I think therapists don't think of is, remember that really early morning slots can be popular too. So people getting in before they start work. So 8 in the morning. I had a friend who did 7 in the morning sessions. I was like, that's not for me. But he was also done by 3, which is still a really long day. But
Right.
yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in not burning out. And so I do think you need
Right.
to work toward your ideal schedule, but you also have to earn that a little bit.
Yeah. And I
Right.
remember when you made that switch, and you did it, it was actually kind of quick, where you just decided, I think I'm ready to just work in normal hours, 8 to 4 kind of thing. And there was maybe a little bit of a lull, but it wasn't very long at all. I mean, it only took a little bit of time to build that up. So it's one of those things where you have to make that risk, take that risk, and then keep working your system until you've got it where you want it. Right.
Right.
Um,
And to be very transparent with y'all, I did not have a system, right? If I had to do it all over again, I would have had a system. I mean, I returned phone calls same day. I was hustling. So if that was my system, then okay. But I wish I had something where I had peace of mind. I've done everything that I can. I worked, the process. I wish I had had that in place. And then secondly, I think I probably, did the thing that I didn't want to do for longer than I should have. So Jeff's right. I make the switch fast, but that's because I'm burning out. Does that make sense? And so I think that's another thing I would have done differently if I could do it all over again, is I would have taken the risk a little bit sooner, and I think you just don't know that it's actually going to work. So that's why people hold on to those late sessions, or maybe not raising your rate, whatever it is, because you're just scared that it's not actually going to work. There almost always is a tiny bit of a lull, and then it ends up going up like this. Every
right.
time you make a risk in your business, always. It's like maybe a month, right? It kind of dips down, and then the next month it's past where you were. So, I mean,
There's
that's
a
just,
lot of
and for
sweating and
me,
wringing of hands in that first month where it's like, and then,
yeah, but just hang on, just wait it
yep,
out, and
yep,
then it's out.
that's right.
Okay.
Something else that I thought of that we've talked about with the follow-ups, the 4 points of contact where you're trying to reach out if you haven't heard from someone, is, everybody on this call is an EFT, I think, an EFT therapist. And so the kinds of clients that may not respond may be the kinds of clients who are going to be good clients, because they're not so much in crisis, right? So that's just something that we've kind of noticed, I think.
Yeah, that's something, I'm glad you're bringing that up. That's something I've learned along the way, is that I would almost judge people who didn't get back to me quickly, thinking, oh, you're probably not ready, or you're not in the place where you're really ready to work. And now I'm thinking, no, actually, it might be that they were a little on the fence to do therapy in the first place, which means sometimes that means there just isn't the urgency. They're not in crisis. It's not 911. And those are sometimes the best clients, because then you have, maybe it's just like, gosh, we really should do this, if it's a couple, right? Or I really should do this. But it's like, oh, it's scary, right? Because, am I going to like my therapist? Is it, are we going to be a good fit? What is this process? Whatever your modality is, I don't, I can read all that I want, but I don't really know what that means. And do I really want to sign up for that? So it's like client care, actually, to make that warm point of contact and just have that human interaction, and to be persistent. That sets the stage for the entire process of therapy, right? It's like I see you have reached out, right? And I'm going to work on your behalf because I'm assuming that there's something stirring on the inside of you, and you need help figuring out what that is. And so even with intake, don't assume that you know what it means when you haven't heard back from somebody. And yes, to Jeff's point, that sometimes those that aren't responding are the best clients because they're not in crisis. So they have sort of a relative amount of safety, or have been resourced enough that they could potentially do some really beautiful, deep work. But I think it's just have a system, right? So like you're not having to make sense of what's happening in the, because you just don't know. That I think sometimes people will reach out to me and like right after they reach out, something crazy happens in their life. Well, I don't know that. Does that make sense? So, okay.
Yeah, that's good. And when you have a consistent system where you're kind of, okay, I'm going to check back on this day, and it's the same across the board, then you know that you're doing good client care. You know that you're keeping up with everybody. So it's just a good practice. So what about training your clients? So like booking in advance, or, so what would you say about that?
Yes, this is my favorite thing. Okay. I had to learn this the hard way too. So this takes being assertive. It takes having a system. So let's say, okay, you did it. Your client is in front of you, right? So now you're past the inquiry to booking stage. They're in front of you. Now, how are you going to keep them, right? Well, part of this is just communicating clearly what the process of therapy is. What is it that you're actually doing? Don't assume that they know that it is a process. I can't tell you how many clients think, okay, I'm going to come to 3 sessions and that should do it. No, that's not usually how it goes, so don't assume that your clients know that it's an actual process. And as much as you can, be really explicit, without being too clinical. But I would say if you're going to err on one side, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and be clinical, say clinical words, but be very explicit about what it is that you're planning to do with them from the first session, so that's one way to really have good retention, is they know what you're doing, what that means, what the expectation is. That's just and then I usually have in the session itself, if you're an EFT therapist, the tango, and there's 5 moves, and the very last move is where you organize basically what we did in the session. So what the new move that you made, contrast it with the cycle that you're normally stuck in. In that move 5 of the tango, I seed attachment. I say, and this is why this is so important for the work that we're doing. And can you imagine there'll be a day when you can do this, and this is what we're working toward, and yay. So I'm like letting them know this is not like, we're still on target. We're still working the plan, the process, and here's where we are, and here's what this means every session. The second piece of this is the just logistical administrative piece. So also don't assume because you've written it in one email that your client knows maybe even how to book a session with you, right? Make whatever your system is, whatever your process is, make that very, very clear. I think a good rule of thumb, and this goes into something else we're going to talk about, how to get your money. You need to actually get your money. I think a good rule of thumb is do business up front. Take care of business in the very beginning of session. So this is scheduling and taking money. And again, kind of awkward for a therapist, right? Therapists don't like to sort of sell themselves. They don't like to talk about money. you just need to get over that. This is, unless you're doing this like as a charity or ministry or a hobby, I'm assuming that you're trying to actually make some money. You just have to work through whatever the awkwardness is for you. And in my experience, the more upfront, clear, kind of assertive you are about the business part, the more at ease your clients are. They want to know, how does this go? What should I expect? So booking and billing are two ways that you need to be really explicit with your clients about how you do this. I'll kind of give you one where what I ended up doing when I was still doing hourly sessions. I only do intensives now, so it's a little bit different. But when I was doing hourly sessions, I had a little like spiel that I gave in the first session. Now, keep in mind, if I had a couple come in and they're actively fighting, like from the waiting room to my room, I wouldn't say, before we get started, I'm going to tell you da 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 da. Obviously, I'm going to be like attuned to what's happening. But assuming they're just coming in like a more typical first session where they're kind of like anxious, nervous, like, how's this going to go? Assuming I have a little bit of space to just talk about how I do things, I will give them a little, maybe 2-3 minute explanation for how I do sessions. And I literally say, every session, I'm just telling you on the front end, I want to do business up front. The reason that I do that is by the end of the session, it is emotional. It does stir things up. And I don't want you to have to think about money or booking. So we're going to always take care of this up front. And I also want to make sure that, that you're getting what you need as far as frequency and stuff like that. So we're going to have this conversation up front. And so I do run your credit card in the very beginning of session. And if I see that it's declined or something like that, this is our time I'll just get a new card. But I'm not going to tell you that I'm going to run it. I'm telling you now, but in future sessions, I'm going to run your card in the beginning of the session. So I just on the side, I would do this even if they're in the waiting room. I would just go ahead and run their card. And then I can see by the time they get to me if it went through or not. So I don't even have to talk about it. This saves you so much time, you guys. It's so efficient to do it this way. And client care. You want your client to walk out of their session, look at their inbox, and if you're using an EHR system like Simple Practice or something, and see paid invoice in their inbox for the session they just had. That feels really good for the client. I remember I took my daughter to therapy, and I mean, it was so unorganized and scattered. I think for that reason alone, she did maybe 2 sessions. I was like, I'm done with this. I didn't get billed for like 3 weeks. I was like, it made me go, hang on a second. Did I give her what she needs? Did I give her a credit card? Maybe I didn't give her a credit card. And that's not what I needed to be thinking about. Does that make sense? So it's just good client care, right? And also for you, do you want to be spending your time hunting down somebody for a credit card number because the card didn't go through? No, you want to take care of that in the beginning. So have a little spiel in the first session of how you do things. And then booking. So I'm talking about payment and I'm talking about booking. For the booking part, what I like to do, I think if you're just getting started, you want to probably handhold your clients a little more than if you're booked solid. What I mean by that is maybe if you're just getting started and you don't have a full caseload yet, every session, ask, can I book your next session? And do it right there in session. Also offer, can I book you 2 months in advance? Would you like to come every week, every other week? What do you think works for your schedule? Go ahead and take the time to do that. We have an online booking system, which I love, and clients love that too. So, a lot of times they don't know. It's like sometimes they can say, yes, book me for the same time next week, and that's great. But sometimes like, well, I don't know if so-and-so has practice on this day or da 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 da. So maybe it's twofold: offer to book, or at least bring it to their attention, right? Or I see that your next session is da 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 da. And then make sure that you book in advance. Or do you like checking in? Do you know how to book online? The first session I like to show, like pull up my computer and show my clients, here's where you go, here's what that looks like. So you want to train your client. You want to get them really good at working your system. I remember when I did so I kind of told you what it would be like if you're not booked solid, where you're hand-holding a little bit. But when I got more booked and I was more full, I told clients, basically, I didn't say it like this, but you snooze, you lose. Get in there, book out. Those popular slots are going to get taken. If I were you, my schedule is open 2 months at a time. If I were you, every time I have a session, book a session 2 months in advance, right? So you're always, you have 2 months of sessions booked all the time. And then, you can let your clients know, I don't want to hold you hostage. I don't want to keep you forever. Like, my goal is to graduate you, right? And so we can have this conversation along the way about, where we are in the process. So that's part of the seating attachment, move 5 in the tango, where we are in the process. And, what that means for, you can't obviously say that means 5 more sessions, but you can generally say, we're like, go ahead and book out for 2 months, right? If you're like in the early stages. So I just said a lot, and I want to know, kind of take a breath here and check in. Any questions about that, or thoughts? Or if you imagine having some kind of a very clear system where you're training your clients, what comes up for you as far as potential blocks of doing that?
I'll go, Kelly. I know when I first 2 or 3 years that I was seeing clients, I would get stuck because without a system, I had no idea how many clients I could take on. So I found myself overbooking, not for the reasons that you were mentioning, because I do that, but overbooking because, oh my gosh, I have too many clients and now I can't fit them all in regularly. And so what it took for me was to, and this is totally different, rather than saying, okay, let's book out 2 months. We just know that they pick a time and that's their time. And so for me, that helped me get organized, and it helped my clients. I have a lot of people who are pilots and a lot of people who travel. It helps them with their scheduling also, because they know, okay, I see Christy on Wednesday, so I'm going to try to book my travel and be in by Tuesday, or, whatever. And we saw a shift in people being able to come to their appointments, because now, they're able to plan around them a little bit better.
Yeah, because it's easier to remember. I have therapy on Tuesday at 9 o'clock. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think my one, thank you, Christy. I think that's especially when you're getting a little bit more full, right? That's maybe a good strategy. I think one thing to keep in mind though, is if you do offer a client a recurring session, like it's, Tuesday at 9 o'clock or whatever, keep an eye on that, because the danger is if that doesn't necessarily mean that they end up being consistent, then they might cancel. Like, let's say you have a 48-hour or 24-hour cancellation notice. It's not quite enough time usually to get somebody to fill that slot. And so if that happens several weeks in a row, my advice would be nix the recurring, session thing. Like, that's kind of more like, just from my perspective, like, you've earned this, you get this because you're so consistent, and this actually helps you show up more consistently, and so that we can, actually do the treatment plan, right, and kind of go through the process in a way that's more realistic for your schedule and all of that. Yeah, so I think that would be my only thing, is I've had that not work. But so I think we do have a therapist on staff that she loves recurring sessions, and I had this conversation with her, and because she did have a client that was sort of abusing it, and I said, this is not working out. You need to think about, I said, okay, of course, if you want to offer that, but also notice the patterns, right? So certain clients might take advantage of that and cancel, like they're booked out and they have the same time for, inevitably, but then they keep canceling. And it might be like amazing reasons that they're canceling, but still, that's a slot that could have been taken by somebody else, especially if it's a good time, like evening or something like that.
Yeah, I've usually worked around that by if someone needs to cancel, most of them are really good about canceling ahead of time. They'll say, hey, Christy, I've got a work thing in, like, what is it now? April. I've got something next month or June. And then that way I hold those spaces open for people who need to reschedule. So I really kind of wind up, sometimes being pretty able to keep those full if I want to. And then there are times when, if I'm like, I just need a break, I don't have to. So I don't think I've had too many people abuse that, but it's unfortunate that your therapist had somebody abuse that.
Yeah. And I think obviously it's very case by case, right? So, sounds like, Christy, that really works out for you.
Yeah.
Which is great. And I think, just whatever you decide, just pay attention, right? Don't keep doing something that doesn't work. Change it up, have a system and work your system. What else, Jeff? Is there something else that I feel like I know we had a lot of things on our little list. You're muted.
I thought I hit it. Are there any other ways to make sure that you get your money? I mean, you talked about, cancellation just briefly, but I know we have a policy on that.
Yeah, I say stick to your cancellation policy. So, and lots of therapists have things like one freebie, but if you do have one freebie, keep track of that, right? Because you might give 2 freebies and think you gave 1 freebie or something like that. Or you can even say, here's the date that I gave you the 1 freebie per practice policy that you signed. This is what I need to do. I think it's hard because we have relationships with our clients, like actual relationships, and they're telling us their deepest, darkest, most beautiful stuff from the inside. And so it's just can be sort of awkward to say, sorry, I'm going to have to charge you for that session. But you have, I think it also, people do get it. And so my favorite are the clients that they go ahead and say, I know that you have to charge me, go ahead and run my card. And I'm like, thank you so much. But
Mhm.
that doesn't always happen. And so just, I would say, be a stickler with your policy, whatever it is. We have a 48-hour cancellation policy. That's because that will give us an actual chance to book that session. A lot of therapists have 24 hours, but whatever it is, just stick to it. And also remember that you get to decide what an emergency is, right? So if, I mean, there's like really good reasons to cancel a session, but at the end of the day, this is your time. You've blocked it out. And I mean, you just have to be really boundaried, I guess, about that. And that's another way that you can get your money.
And we have
Nikki,
that in the practice policies too, right, Kelly? Because we explain all of that, that it's the therapist's decision, determination of whether it was emergency or not. So they know up front, that that's going to be the case.
and I think this goes without saying, like if someone's throwing up or has COVID, like I don't want you to come to session, and like there's no charge for that. And then obviously if you cancel, right, like, that's something that you need to really work to reschedule that session. Maybe even like, I would say, like, do something like go kind of above and beyond to reschedule that session, maybe even work in an hour that you normally wouldn't work or something like that. Nikki, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, just some random thought about the sort of the one freebie. I don't put that in my policy, but then I keep it in mind that I'm prepared to allow them one freebie, so that when I allow it, I kind of get the brownie point in terms of its grace, but it also allows me to say at that point, I realize you're not in the flow of things or whatever. I want to emphasize this, but, in whatever language is appropriate for that client, so that then they feel like, oh, okay, so they got something. But at the same time, it allows me to reinforce the policy at the same time. So yeah, I mean, small thing.
I love that. I think that's such a good idea. Don't put the one freebie in your practice policy so they don't expect it. And then and also like who actually reads the practice policies, I don't know, but maybe some people do.
Yeah.
But then you are kind of offering them something. And so I think that's really, really lovely. And it's a good idea. Anything else before we move on? I think the main way of getting your money is charging in the beginning of session. You'd be surprised if you don't do that, especially if you don't have a good way of keeping track of your session and your actual income, right? You should have some kind of a spreadsheet where you can see the sessions that you did, what you're charging, and then look at your bank and see what's coming in, and do, or if you're using an EHR like Simple Practice, you should be able to run a Simple Practice report to see what your number is for the month, and then look at your bank and see, are we matching up here? So you just want to know, sometimes you just forget, right? If you don't get in the habit of doing it in the beginning of session or something, you can do auto pay through Simple Practice or whatever your EHR is. You have to have some really good defined way of doing the same thing every single time. And then I would say double check it. I've had times where I didn't. I mean, maybe it was like a just true crisis. The client comes in screaming, right? And obviously I'm like, I gotta and then I have a session right after, and then maybe I have to rush home to, deal with kids, right? Then I forget. And so I can potentially never charge for that session. And I would never know because the client's not going to tell me. Some clients will, but so just have some sort of checks and balance. Are you actually getting money for every single session? Have a way to look at just the numbers. What is your bank? If you have a business bank account, what's that final number? And then, yeah, all of that.
You want to talk budgeting a little bit
Yeah, budgeting like
for
because we're
future
self-employed.
expenses, for low months, those kinds of things.
Yes, 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 yes. Okay, so Jeff and I kind of came up with this over the years, and we first did this for our personal, like, when I was a solo practitioner, I felt like just our personal budget, if that makes sense. But now we actually do it for the business as well as personal. So regardless if you're a group practice owner or a solo practitioner, it's really smart to save for slow months. And so, in a way, it's kind of, it's a little bit like giving yourself a salary, like a consistent salary, if that makes sense. So think about what's like a realistic number that if you average this amount of sessions a month, and you're charging this amount and like, what is it that you're hoping to reach? What's kind of your number that you would feel good about and comfortable with? And then there will be months that you make a lot more than that, right? So taking that excess and deciding how you want to use it. And so sometimes it's saving for slow months, sometimes it's saving for a continuing education. Obviously, with all of this, you're having to factor in taxes, self-employment taxes, like all of this, but think about and maybe be a bit conservative about it. What's your kind of number, your comfortable number for what you hope to make a month? And then, yeah, try to save. And I don't know, Jeff, I feel like you've been so helpful, for me in helping kind of come up with what is it that I'm not saying or missing about how we do this?
Yeah, sure. So every month we're looking at what's the number that's coming in, what are all the expenses that are monthly that we see on the credit card every single month, your EMR, your G Suite, your whatever it is that's just a monthly expense, right? Taking all that out. And then, your taxes and so forth, and you kind of had that number after all of that, right? Then we say, okay, what do we need to be saving for? So every month we're putting away money for CEs, putting away money for all of the long-term expenses that only happen once a year. Maybe your Squarespace site charges you $350, in April. Well, we're saving for that every single month so that it doesn't hit us. And then that affects that month, right? In a larger way than all the rest of the months. So I've got a spreadsheet with all of our long-term expenses that are once a year or even once every 2 years, and how much we need to save monthly to make sure we've got that money ready to go as soon as that payment is due. That's been helping a lot to make each month more consistent. And then saving for things like just miscellaneous, we save a certain amount of money every month for just things that pop up so that we've got it ready to go instead of having to take it out of our bottom line, in the next month. So that's one way we've learned to think about it. And when we have extra, that's when we say, okay, then we can save that for future months where maybe we are taking a vacation and we're all self-employed and we don't get paid when we take vacations, or, for just a month where we've had a health issue and we can't work as much, or the kids are all sick and can't work as much, or whatever it is. That's been very helpful.
Yeah,
to think about
it's
it that
for
way.
anything else, it's just peace of mind, honestly. And that, again, that we're not just reacting to what's happening, that we have a system in place and we're just working the system. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway of this whole talk. Okay, I
Did
see
you
a
see
question.
Shannon's? Yeah.
And I
Go ahead.
want to answer that. And Shannon, can you unmute yourself? Hi, Shannon. You said you do intensives and you're kind of wanting to hear more about, and I do too. And a lot of people actually that are listening are either interested in doing them or are doing them, but also longer sessions after follow-up work. brilliant. We do that too. Tell me what I want to make sure I know what the question is though.
Well, sorry, I was following up with the scheduling part. And so I originally set it up so I could have people sign themselves up, but then it feels a bit more fluid. It's not just like a 1 hour block that people are blocking for, or it's kind of irregular. And so I've ended up just usually scheduling my people. So I'm just curious about how those of you who do intensives approach the follow-ups, like as far as frequency as well as length of appointments. I'm just curious about that part. And how can you standardize that for online?
Right. I think that's tricky, Shannon. I think we're trying to figure out a good way to do that, to be honest with you. But one thing that I have learned is have the conversation during the intensive on the last day. So you're shaking your head, you probably already do that. So like, hey, here's what we did. I'm so excited. Yay. Here's what I think follow-up work needs to look like. And going ahead and trying to book the follow-up session during the intensive. So hopefully about, no more than a month out. And then for scheduling, so yeah, people who do intensives love the longer sessions and the not having to feel constricted to an hour. That's part of why they did the intensive in the first place. Is why therapists love it too. And so the scheduling online for longer session is tricky. One thing you could do is you could say, hey, go book yourself online and look for 2 back-to-back openings and book them both. And I know that means we're going to have a long session. Or if you want to set up your availability in a way that it's specific to like a longer session, some of our therapists do that, where clients can actually look for those. I think I don't love that, to be on personal opinion. I don't love that because then I feel like I don't get to really maximize my whole caseload, because I've got plenty of people who don't want 2-hour sessions. So I'd rather, but that's just, I really like efficiency and maximizing. So I'd rather like my client do the hard work and I just tell them what the expectation is and they can do it. But then, yeah, the other thing is because they're obviously, if they're doing an intensive and they want longer sessions, they're very, very invested. And so, maybe just it's worth sitting down and kind of scheduling it out, maybe. So you doing a little more hand-holding, I think that, makes sense too.
That is helpful. Yeah, I definitely will start scheduling more often during session because I have the ones where I offer them, 4 dates in the next 2 months, and then they don't get back to me until 3 days before the first one. And by then they're gone.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And Shannon, something else on that we've done with our therapists is when there's a session that's longer than 2 hours, we have a policy where they will put a deposit for those longer sessions. Because if they end up canceling, 48 hours out, now you don't just have 1 hour that's not going to be taken. Potentially it's 3 hours. And that can really mess you up. So
I
we
like
do have
that
policy for both for intensives, obviously, and then also for the extended sessions is what we call them.
Yeah, I like that. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
Awesome. Okay. Business basics. Any other, we've got like 3 minutes left. I know I'm kind of speaking to a big audience here, right? So I've got people who are just starting out, and then I've got people who are like, getting creative with diversifying sources of income. So, but back to the basics. Any last questions before I kind of summarize what we talked about, or thoughts? Jeff, did I miss anything big on what did we cover it? Really? Okay.
We did.
I think more than anything is have a good system and have a good way to work your system, right? Expect that you're going to have to build this. So that means a little bit of hustle, but also take some risks so that you can work toward your ideal life, right? You want this to be sustainable. So you don't want to be doing, 7 p.m. sessions forever. And then be really clear. Everything needs to be really explicit, more than you think. So over communicate rather than under communicate to your clients. Check in. Do they get it? Right? Keep in mind that we're dealing with people who are in distress. So simple admin stuff is kind of going in one ear and out the other. Right? So just be gentle, be persistent, make sure that they have what they need to actually work with you. And yeah, I just think that if it's clear and it's consistent and you have a system that you're working through, you should expect to stay booked, to look at your schedule and see 2 months out and your book solid. Like that's a realistic expectation, especially if you love what you do and you're working hard to be good at it. That is really what it's, the word of mouth, the actual experience with you that goes a really long way. And get support. Make sure, that's part of why you're here. Make sure you're not doing this alone. Talk to other people. How are you doing this? What works for you? Right? Everybody kind of evolves into their own system. I'm part of a group practice. Christy's part of this with me, a group practice owner group. Each other every day. I'm not going to do everything that everybody's doing, but it kind of makes me think. So it's just good to kind of be in community with your peers, not just for the therapy technique, but also for the business of therapy. All right, it's 1:00. That's my final say. I'm really appreciative of all of you for being here. And, like always, just reach out if you have questions. You can email me. I'm happy to really support you in any way. And if there's something that you'd like to hear about, let me know. And I can usually find a good speaker that can, talk to us about whatever that subject is. So thank you guys. Have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.